Welcome to all of you to the Catholic Buzz podcast. It is season 5 of the Catholic Buzz podcast, so we're excited to welcome you back here. My name is Father Daniele, and I'm joined for the 5th season by Josh Sullivan.
Hello.
Welcome to you.
Thank you.
And Matt Van Milligan.
Hello.
Our most popular of our 3 on this podcast, of course, is Matt Van Milligan. Welcome back to you, and congratulations on 5 seasons of the Catholic Buzz.
That's been crazy. It's been crazy.
It's been a beautiful journey, and we're so appreciative to our whole crew here, Dave, Kevin, and of course, all those who listen to our podcast and watch our podcast as well on YouTube. So that's all I'm going to say about the beginning of our season 5, because we got so much to get going into today.
A lot happened this summer.
A lot happened this past summer. And today, for the purpose of this episode, we're going to focus on the great controversy at the Paris Summer Olympics. But not only the actual controversy, because I think there's been a lot of time to talk about what happened there, but more so we're going to talk about what is the right Christian response when things like this happen, because they are happening more and more today.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're coming to a point where making fun of Christians is one of the few things that are allowed on the public stage, and so we've seen that a couple of times, not just at the Olympics. We saw that in other things, other areas that we'll talk about. But it's a problem now. So Christians have to. We've been the silent. I mean, we've been told to turn the other cheek. And that is a proper response to certain things. And what does that actually look like, though? Because there is turning the other cheek, and then there's being stepped on. And so there's 2 different ways of responding. So.
Yeah, and I think we have a responsibility too to stand up for our faith, of course, but also to model the faith to other people. So we'll talk a little bit about that today. So let's talk a little bit about what exactly happened at the Summer Olympics this past summer, because with every Olympics that happens, there's grandiose sort of opening ceremonies, right? And some might say, to begin with, like putting aside this controversy, that the opening ceremonies of the Olympics were a bit bizarre, right? And then, if I'm going to explain this right, there was, at the sort of conclusion of the opening ceremonies, this tableau of actors who sort of situated themselves almost to represent the image of Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper. And the person in the middle, of course, where Jesus would be in the painting of The Last Supper, was a woman in drag, who had sort of a crown on her head. And the others gathered around her, sort of like this tableau of the Last Supper, sort of, bringing some mockery to that scene. Is that fair enough to summarize?
Yeah, and there was there were some kind of developments with that, because it wasn't just those elements of the Last Supper, and the initial response of the organizers of this is like, no, it wasn't the Last Supper, it's something else. So there are kind of two paintings, and it seems to be kind of a hybrid, because it also contains gods from the Greek pantheon. So it has Bacchus or Dionysius, if you want the Latin version. So they claim to be depicting an earlier Dutch painting called the Feast of the Gods, or something like that. But again, there were kind of clear allusions. If you're familiar with the Leonardo da Vinci painting, or any depiction of the Last Supper, really, there's
one side of the table, and all that stuff.
There's clear reference to that,
and even the posing of the people, and like having certain people facing away, and people.
Even the hat that she was wearing sort of was shaped like the Eucharistic host, with rays sort of coming out of it. But also included in the tableau, it wasn't just the fact that they shaped themselves in a tableau. There was a lot of innuendo, like sexual innuendos.
Yes, there really was.
Sort of this.
And that's part of the problem is so what ended up happening is, I think anybody looking at it would have thought, and watching it over, you think the Last Supper. That's what you think of. They went on to, the person that was in the middle actually went on to make some tweets and comments about like that it was, Da Vinci, hey, we're in the Da Vinci now, or whatever it was. She made a couple comments there. And then, but because of the backlash, they went back to say, okay, it's not that, it's this other thing. But if you hold the painting side by side, it's very clearly one, not the other. You know what I mean?
And even to what you were saying about that, it kind of you can like mocking religion is the last acceptable prejudice. That idea that like even if they are kind of bringing in elements of kind of the Greek pantheon, like the message is the same. That like religion is an object of ridicule. And that's I think like because it wasn't just Catholics that responded. It wasn't just Christians that responded. Like at one degree to just say this is in poor taste or whatever, but a lot of religious and non-religious leaders throughout the world, like at an international level, just said like this is unacceptable. This isn't just in poor taste. This is sacrilege and very, very offensive.
Very true. Even the Muslim community spoke out against what happened because of the mocking of Jesus in this way. And actually, we were out for a walk this summer. We ran into some of our some Muslim friends, and we were talking about that. How they said, of course, we thought that was wrong. You know, they see Jesus, of course, as a prophet, not as God, but still they were offended by this, so they spoke out against it. And because of the backlash, you know, the French, God bless them, the French Conference of Catholic Bishops, of course, that's where the Olympics were being held, spoke out against it. Numerous Catholic Church leaders across the world spoke out against it. The Vatican released a statement about a week later after it happened. But interestingly enough, after that backlash happened, the organizers of the Olympic Games sort of released sort of an explanation / apology of what happened. And there were some people, even though some people were saying that this was wrong, and we're talking about the backlash of it, there were a lot of people supporting it, saying that it was a message of inclusivity and tolerance, right? They were using those sort of buzzwords, and which kind of caused a little more backlash, saying, well, it's not really a message of tolerance and inclusivity when we're excluding sort of the world's Christian population, right?
And I don't recommend anybody go watch it, but if you have watched it, I would still say how. It's not clear that's the message at all.
Yeah, and I think the other two things, I mean, the other things, and you kind of mentioned them, and so again, not to like go watch it, but there's two other things that I want to point out that kind of turned me off of the whole thing, which is there is a guy lying on the table in blue where you can almost clearly see private parts, and then there's a kid, like a 10-year-old kid, right there beside them, right close by. Like that's those things like that. Introducing children into this mix of that there's
I have an image here I'm looking at right now, and I'm just sort of distressed by it a little bit.
It's major problems, not just with the Eucharist and stuff, but like the whole nature of this. Anyways,
and to attack, you know. One of the sad things was to attack the Eucharist, like to attack Jesus at the Last Supper. And I remember reading the initial CTV report. I don't have it up in front of me right now, but I remember reading it when it first came out. And it described how they described the Last Supper. Sort of the whole tone of the article from CTV was trying to downplay what was happening at the Olympics. And it described the Last Supper. You know, it says, for Christians, the Last Supper is when Judas, an apostle of Jesus, betrayed him. And that was how they described the Last Supper. So right off the bat, you know, for people unfamiliar with the Last Supper, I mean, the painting is so famous, probably most people have seen it. But the Last Supper is what it is. The Last Supper, the time when Jesus gathered his apostles together, and they instituted two things that are very important for our Catholic Church. The first being the priesthood of Jesus, you know, so these men were commissioned to be the apostles, the priests of the church, of course, Jesus being the priest, the high priest. And then the Eucharist was instituted that night. Jesus took bread, took wine, said, this is my body, this is my blood. So it's not just sort of a story of Jesus that we kind of brush aside, which I don't think there are stories of Jesus we do push aside, but this is a really
one of the main ones.
Fundamental moment in the life of Jesus before he's crucified. And right away, the media was sort of trying to downplay what the event even was. It was almost like, you know,
he healed the blind man. And then he went and had supper.
Yeah, and then his friend betrayed him. What's
Yeah.
the big deal
Yeah.
if they sort of mocked it, right? And here, what was more sort of mind blowing to me was the apology that was given by the organizers. It said that the whole point of the opening ceremony was to be inclusive and for tolerance. There was never, I'm quoting, never an intention to show disrespect to any religious group. On the contrary, we really did try to celebrate community tolerance. And I believe that this ambition was achieved. If people have taken any offense, we are, of course, really, really sorry. So even in their apology, it's like, okay,
It's your problem.
Yeah, we believe that we achieved tolerance in this scene, in this tableau, in this, whatever acting out of this scene. And you know what I find really disturbing is that the opening ceremonies of the Olympics wasn't just like, hey, lights, camera, action, and it wasn't improvised.
No.
There were months, probably a year, maybe more. I don't know how much goes into the
preparation.
rehearsals, the writing of scripts, the rehearsing, the choreography, the costumes. You know what's involved when it comes to a production, and the months and the year perhaps that this was going on, that no one may have said like, hey, maybe we shouldn't bark up this tree.
Yeah.
And God bless, maybe people did.
Yeah.
But it wasn't enough for them to say, oh, you're right. Maybe we should leave Jesus alone.
Yeah.
And on such a grand stage, like this is an event where the world comes together. Really, the Olympics traditionally is to celebrate athletics achievements. It's to bring countries together.
Yeah.
And the event literally started by sending a message to the almost 3 billion Christians in this world that your religion is something for us to mock.
Yeah. I think too, and we would see a different, and we talked about this at the very beginning, but we would see a different response to, first of all, I don't think it would ever happen, but could you imagine if they were to come out and then to mock Moses getting the 10 Commandments, or Elijah going up in chariots of fire, or something like I'm thinking more the Jewish faith,
right?
Or the Muslim faith. Like there's something in history with the Prophet Muhammad, or you know what I mean? Like if there were depictions there
of another faith, yes,
how different the response would be. And first of all, that it never would have happened, probably, right? And I think that's part of it.
Yeah, and that's a really good point because. The Summer Olympics is not the only time that we've seen on a large scale that Christianity is sort of mocked. Yeah. You mentioned the Muslim faith. We remember the controversy with the Charlie Hebdo magazine back in 2015.
Yeah, what was
they
that?
Printed a cartoon, I believe in Paris.
Yeah.
Hey,
it was in France. Yeah.
It was in France.
Yeah.
They printed a cartoon of the Prophet Muhammad, and that printing of that cartoon prompted like an attack where the Charlie Hebdo offices, that's the name of the magazine that printed the cartoon, like people were killed. Like they went in and killed them because they had mocked the Prophet Muhammad.
Yeah.
So that's sort of an extreme example of a faith being mocked in the public sphere. But I don't know if you remember 1 year ago, about June of 2020, what year are we in? 2023. We're in 2024, a year ago, so June 2023. Remember the controversy with the Los Angeles Dodgers?
Is this the baseball game?
The baseball game?
Yeah.
Where they had invited this group called the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence.
Yeah.
Which were basically...
Not an actual order.
Not a Catholic order, for sure.
Basically, a group that mocks Catholic nuns and the Catholic faith in general. And they were originally invited to celebrate one of the evenings at the baseball stadium before the game started. I believe it was part. I believe it was part of the Pride Month celebrations. Okay. And after the backlash, people said like, "Hey, this group openly mocks the Catholic Church. If you see their materials online, very sexually provocative. Like they have Jesus on the cross, kind of like a sex symbol.
Yeah.
They kind of mock the Virgin Mary and all these things. So people spoke out against it and said, like, this is not a group that should be present at a baseball game. Like baseball is sort of America's game, and where the whole family comes out and things. And not to mention just that reason, but we're mocking the people of the Catholic faith. So surprisingly, I guess the LA Dodgers rescinded their invitation and said, okay, not an appropriate time to come to our stadium. Maybe another time. Yeah. Well, then a bunch of other supporters of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence sort of said, and probably just people jumping on the bandwagon,
of course.
So then they were re-invited to the event. And I believe if you look back at the event, the stadium that holds thousands and thousands of people was pretty much empty when the Sisters of the Perpetual Indulgence were there to receive some sort of accolade or achievement from the LA Dodgers, and then I guess filled up as the game sort of started. People didn't want any part of it, right? So why am I saying all this? These are just some examples of where sort of Christianity is sort of mocked in the public sphere, right?
So I think we have to look at then what is our supposed to or what's our response, because I think there is this culture in our Catholic faith, and it's maybe in Canadian culture where you turn the other cheek, and we're taught this from if someone's mocking you, you turn the other cheek and let them have the other cheek to slap. Like if they slap one cheek, slap the other cheek, that kind of thing, and that's a normal turn phrase that we use, but also. So there is that, but that won't get any results, and that will people will just keep walking over you to a point. So what are we supposed to do besides just turn the other cheek? And not that we would ever suggest go shoot up a magazine place, right. So what there's obviously two different sides. One is just ignore it; it will hopefully go away, and the other one is drastic measures. But our Catholic faith teaches us something different. There is an in between road that we are supposed to go down, right?
Yeah, and I think that being said, we're talking about people mocking the Christian faith on the public sphere, but think about in your own life. Yeah. Think about in your life and in your life and in my life, and those of you who are listening today, think about an example in your own life where you have been mocked or discriminated against because of your Christian faith. Think of an example. I can think of many.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? You guys can think of many. So to answer your question, what should be our response? Because I think there's two levels of response. Yeah. There's our own personal response in our own personal lives. Are we just sort of a doormat for people? Because, we say, turn the other cheek. Jesus tells us, turn the other cheek. And so I think somewhere deep in our Christian identity, that's sort of ingrained in us. Don't cause a problem.
Yeah.
Don't keep it quiet, and maybe take this suffering on and apply it to the merit of something else. Offer our suffering for something else, which I do believe has merit. I'm not, that absolutely. But I think there's two levels here. Because they're connected. If we're not going to respond in our personal lives,
then it's going to escalate.
If we're going to let people just treat us like a doormat, if we're going to let people mock us or discriminate against us because of our Christian faith in our own personal life, well, there's no way that we're going to respond on a bigger scale when things like the Olympics happen, or the opening scenes of the Olympics, or the Dodgers, or whatever it happened. If we're just so ingrained in our personal life to not respond, we're going to let these bigger things happen. Yeah. I remember back in Canada when the government was releasing sort of it was a fund or not a scholarship.
The summer internship.
Summer internship money for businesses to hire summer students or money
It was a
for
regular
business.
grant. Yeah,
it was a regular grant
for
that
the summer.
happens every year. People apply to it, and all of a sudden, this particular year, I believe, which is now 3 or 4 years ago, or maybe longer
even
than
longer
that,
than that,
longer than
yeah.
that, maybe 5, 6, 7. Yeah, it was before COVID.
Yep.
Remember? So they had added inconspicuously. They just added this box.
Yep.
That was like by applying to this fund where we'll pay for your summer student or summer interns, you are agreeing to abide by the Canadian government's mandate that that abortion should be freely available to all people. Like the most random thing on an application for summer students, right? And so what did it do that summer? It took Christians and other faith groups and it said, okay, now it's time to put our money where our mouth is, sort of thing. And all of these summer camps run by churches
they would get
or
grants.
faith groups that would normally get grants just to survive and put on these programs for children. Churches who hire extra help in the summer, whatever it was, all these programs now were eliminated from receiving this sort of funding for summer work, all because this sort of question about a moral subject was added to it. And, there wasn't much of a stink about it.
No.
There wasn't much of a stink. And, lots of programs that summer suffered.
Of course.
So it all comes down, I think, about like our own, do we have the willpower to stand up for our faith? And that doesn't mean being like a bull in a china shop and causing destruction everywhere we go, obviously.
Yeah, I think that's the question, because like what does that look like? So like we're not going to be silent. We recognize that this is a problem, and this isn't just bad art. This is sacrilege and this is blasphemy. So this is like, we need to say that this is a problem in really strong terms, but like you said, like we don't go blow up a magazine. It was like, but we look to like, okay, what did Christ do? Like so Christ endured mockery, but Christ didn't hold his tongue.
Yes.
We're not to be like St. Peter and bring out the sword
right away.
No, because like I think there is, because we want to be between these extremes of not getting worked up and like causing more damage than help, and just being silent or being a doormat. It's just on the other end. It's like, okay, what can we do? Because we should do something, but how do we find that balance between, okay, Christ himself offered himself up for mockery, like you can pray for the people who do it. You can be honest about the fact, like this is a problem, especially that is on an international stage. But how do we have that conversation? How do we communicate that to different people?
I think it's time that we realize that this is kind of the new norm, right? Like that Christians sort of it's an open field, like that we're just going to be attacked, and part of me is okay with that. Like because I truly believe that the devil always tries to separate where God is present, right? And the devil always tries to attack where there's truth. So we can't expect that we won't be attacked.
And you could say that it's not really a new norm, especially since the context of this is France. This has been a theme, since you'd say the French Revolution. That before that, French Catholicism was kind of the beating heart of European Catholicism. But after that, like there was an attempt to systematically eradicate religion, and particularly Catholicism, from France. And there's still, you would say, a residual aspect of that in French culture. That like even in French Canadian culture, we had what was it, the Charter of Values a little while ago, like an actual systematic attempt that religion has no place in the public sphere except as an object of mockery.
I think too, one of the things, like you said, because back in France too, if I remember correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, there was a cardinal or something that went to take reparations for the sins of the revolution, or trying to get rid of the Catholics. And I think so. He came up with the "Blessed be God" prayer, right?
Yes,
blessed be God, blessed be His holy name, blessed.
The divine graces. So it was an Italian priest in response to the French Revolution. Yeah.
And so I think part of our like you kind of mentioned it. Jesus didn't. There were times where Jesus was silent, but there were other times where he quipped back and he put them, like, I mean, the famous one for me is when they're saying, okay, they're trying to put him in, who do we pay taxes to? Should we pay taxes to God, or would we pay? And he said, pull out the coin in your pocket. And again, I've talked about this on the show before, but it's because they're standing in the temple and he's asking them to pull out a coin. And when they pull out a coin, he says, whose face is on that? It's because it's Caesar's face. And that was illegal for a Pharisee to have, or for any Jewish person to have in the temple, because it would be called an idol. So like just right there, that little bit of extra knowledge, knowing that Jesus just went, what's that? Okay, let me prove how you're wrong. Like let me prove how you are being two-faced, or whatever the case may be. And like called him out on that, and he pulls out and he goes, okay, then give to Caesar what's Caesar's, give to God what's God. Like you're telling everyone else that they have to turn in the money because the idol worship and everything else, but you're not doing it yourself. Like he called them out on their own varsity. There are times where he was quiet, when there were lies being thrown against him, when there were things like when they're saying he said this, that, or whatever, like when they brought him lies I'm thinking after the Last Supper, when he's being mocked and stuff. But there's also times where he stood up there and he said, you say that I am king. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, this is what you're saying. This is like, he brought truth to the situation almost every time. And so knowing that we are to hold our tongues at some times, but other times we are supposed to speak out. But then, like you said, it's not to come out with a sword. It is though to speak out, defend our faith, but then realize why this is happening. And the reason why this is happening is because people don't understand what our faith teaches, or don't understand that this is one of the most important things for the entire church, the entire world, is the institution of the Eucharist. Like making mockery of it is a problem. And so we need to educate more. We need to show people what the Eucharist is. We need to come out there. We need to do our Corpus Christi walks. I mean, it isn't lost on the fact that during this time of it going on in Paris, the opposite across the world in the United States was the Corpus Christi walk, the Eucharistic
revival.
That's right, walking across all of United States and ending in the big Eucharistic Congress in where it finished there with thousands of Americans, particularly joining in the big stadium.
Yeah, I think
praising.
I think what you're saying, the dialogue with Pontius Pilate gives some real perspective there, because like Pilate says, you know I have the power to crucify you, and Jesus said, like, frankly, like, you can't actually hurt me. It's like this needs to happen, like, but no power has been given to you except by God. That is like. Yes, the Olympic thing received a lot of attention. It was an international incident, or at that level. It's like, this doesn't harm God.
Yeah.
That this is like this harms the public perception of people's faith. This is a direct we'll say affront to the faith of billions of people around the world. It is an insult. It is sacrilege. It is blasphemy. It's like, but it doesn't harm God. It's like, okay, what is the harm that's done? It's like, okay, the public perception of the Eucharist, okay, is the damage done? It's like, you're saying, like, what's our response? Okay, how do we bring more attention and awareness to what the Eucharist is? And what
education.
Yeah, exactly. So I think kind of the National Eucharistic
Congress of that.
The image I have in my head is like, it's very typical of us Christians to sort of take some attacks from people. The image I have in my head is when we gather, the annual life chain.
Yeah.
We gather on the street just as it's silent witness that we love life.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's all we're doing.
Yeah.
And we hold up a sign that says choose life, or whatever it might say, And like every year we go out there for it, and some communities have 40 days for life, right? Where they do 40 days in a row, or some communities have once a week on Wednesday outside the hospitals or whatever it might be. And like, there's families out there, and there's people of goodwill out there. And then people driving by are giving the finger and shouting swears outside the window, and in some cases throwing things at them. And it's just like, that's the image I have, sort of like at this war we have in our world, where it's like, yes, as Christians, we're supposed to be composed and prayerful and loving, right? And we live in a world that sometimes flips us the bird and swears at us and shouts things at us or whatever. And God bless, I'm just picturing some of our seniors who sort of go out there for the life chain, and they just hold their sign tighter, and they offer an extra Hail Mary
for them.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, this is sort of the image coming to my heart, like, yes, it is wrong to mock the Christian faith.
Yeah.
And I do believe we have a responsibility to stand up and add our voice.
Yeah.
Right? But in a greater way, I think what we're saying here is there is a responsibility of Christians also to live what it means to be a Christian in today's world. Like, how do we love people who hate us? Jesus says, like, what good is it if you only love people who love you back?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like, how do we effectively love people who hate us? How do we not cause greater division? So I think maybe one of the insights I've learned is the Christian mentality, the Christian thought process is that we are able to separate the person from the action, right?
Oh, interesting.
Like
Yeah.
we say, like Josh,
Yeah.
like we like you, but some of the things you do
Yeah.
aren't right.
Yeah.
And as Christians, that's sort of ingrained in our head.
Yeah.
Right? So the
You
sin...
you are a child of God. You do actions outside that can harm you, harm yourself, harm your soul. That are we call sins.
Yeah.
But you are a child of God, and
That's
we
right.
love you.
And
for
we
it.
love you
Your
for
worth
it.
is there.
Yes. And I think
Yeah.
that society can't make the distinction between the person and the action. That's why when we call out sort of moral evils
Yeah.
or things that aren't, things that are contrary to the gospel, people take it as a direct
Offense.
attack
Yeah.
on them as a person.
Yeah.
Whereas we're saying, no, we love you. Like, we love you. But we also love you enough that we want you to encounter Jesus. And some of the things that you're doing in your life aren't leading you there.
Yeah.
That's the Catholic thinking,
Yeah.
and that's the Christian thinking. But in society, as soon as we speak up and say something, well, we've condemned a whole group of people
Yeah.
personally,
Yeah.
and attacked them personally.
And like you said, I think that's one of the big things. So your actions then define you.
Yes.
So if you steal something, you're always a thief. There's no
exactly.
coming back from it because you're always a thief. Whereas in the
Right.
Catholic Church or the Christian Church would say, no, there is forgiveness. That one action does not define who you are, because your worth and who you are is because God loves you and you're a child of God.
That's right.
But so you're not always a thief. You stole something. You know what I mean? But in the world's point of view is, no, if you did this action, then you are always this thing. And that's part of the conflict that we get today, even with people's sexualities and people like, okay, if you did this one thing, then you must always be this thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so people are defining themselves through their actions, not realizing that you can screw up and come back to forgiveness. And this is one of the big controversies, I think, that we in the world today that we have a problem with, which is realizing that as much as the world says otherwise, the church is saying you can always fix it, right? You can always come back. You can always ask for forgiveness. You can always come back to Jesus. Loves you no matter what. The parable of the son, but the runaway son. But the other thing there is, and I think that's the last point is Jesus on the cross. He went through the mockery. He did these things, but then he offered forgiveness.
Yeah.
And the last words, coming to that forgiveness part. So.
Because you for what our response should be. It was like
Yes.
like bless those who persecute you. It was like, okay, that's tough. Like that's
Yeah.
really tough, especially when as you were saying, like you have if you're not able to separate the behavior from the person, then it's like you want to talk about a sin, you want to talk about a behavior, but if it's associated with the person, conversation is shut down or short-circuited because I'm a victim. And there's a temptation for us as Catholics, as people who are encountering this stuff on social media, news outlets, whatever, to fall into that trap. So there's like, there's a difference between recognizing a scandal and being scandalized. So it's like
yes,
if
good
there's
call.
like if you have like you can rightly point out that something is scandalous, that this is literally presenting a stumbling block for others, or being an obstacle to the development of faith in other people. It's like, but sometimes there's a temptation, and you can see this in the way that this is reported, to be scandalized. We're a victim. We've been victimized here. Just like that's it's not helpful for us to play that game, and it can distract us from the good that we can do, bringing people's attention to this is what the Eucharist is, and this is why it matters.
That's great.
Amen. So I think, you know, to have the courage to be able to, you know, to add our voice to when things aren't going well in the public sphere, but also to have the courage and the love to do so in our personal lives too. Like to have loving conversations with people who oppose the Christian faith by our words, yes, and our actions, like and how we comport ourselves as Christians in the world. I think people need to know the love of Jesus, and I think that love of Jesus can tear through even the strongest and hardest,
the stonest
of
stone.
Yeah. That's all the time we have today. But thanks for this conversation on our first episode of season 5. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. If you're watching, if you have a question for us, a comment to add to us, you can send us an email at askus@thecatholicbuzz.com. You can also like this podcast or like this video and share it with a friend and share the good news with other people. So that's all the time we got. So for Josh Sullivan and Matt Van Milligan, my name is Father Daniele, and we'll see you next time on The Catholic Buzz.